Okay, so what are we doing? Who we are and what do we need? So we have started density functional theory, which has three important cornerstones that we need to cover and a lot of auxiliary materials. So our first meeting on density functional theory is Thomas Fermi approach, which is not needed, which is auxiliary for education. And the second meeting was on the what? Theorem. Coulomb theorem, which tells what? What did we use?
If you have one density, there's only one energy possible. In one wave function.
So, charge density determines everything.
Correct.
External potential and the rest of the stuff. Right? And it is what you are putting into the flowchart, or what you all have already put there. Okay. There are two important things more. One is the second theorem that if one has correct density, then one has minimal energy. So correct choice of total density is responsible for minimization of energy. And upon we agree with this idea, which you can tell, yes, I agree, let's go forward. Then we can go to the next step, which is a very important achievement of the humankind, is a bridge from boring theorems to practical reality. The algorithm that allows to implement the theorems and use them for practical calculations. So the theorems by themselves are boring and useless. They are just to dry our brains, but there is a practical algorithm that converts the saying of the theorems into a way how to get electronic structure of any model. And this will be our meeting on the coming Tuesday. So then we will go in a more or less freestyle in adding observables, adding additional chapters of density functional theory, and then go to the next big section of the PDDFT. On the practical side, so we are doing very good in theory, in the background, and the practical component is a little slower than ideal. So we should speed up when we meet next time, and coming Wednesday there is physically no chance to do. I don't know, we by default we just skip. If I will have time, I will pre-record maybe some instructions from home. Because there is a important set of skills that we should pick up, and we can do something at home, or we can meet for a longer period, because 2 hours is not sufficient. Well, although it is the lab's activity is free, you are coming there by a free will, but we should plan on sitting there a little longer. This what we do is behind the schedule. No. Plus. What about number 3? Almost there. It is very non-linear in response to clicks. If you would practice this technology during your presentations, then you will probably go for 3 hours rather than hour and a half. So we may need to adjust our plans, and depending on how quickly we go in with labs, we may postpone it from 3rd to 10th. So let's be dynamic and judge together whether it is necessary, because our formal next lab will be on November 2nd, and then if you do presentations immediately next morning, it is possible, but it will be a little jammed. Maybe too much stress. So we'll decide. Again. And the list of practical questions is the implementation of density functional theory for practical calculations with VASP software that we started yesterday, and hopefully each of you can take any atomic model, convert it into appropriate input format, and compute its electronic structure with VASP, based on what we did last time. I will distribute by email the homework for the next time we meet. Tuesday, I think. So that, and it will be stated there, please convert all models that you have into VASP format, run single point, and compute density of states. But this is like 10% of the skills that we want to pick up in the remaining practical labs. So I will probably, before we go to the theorem, I will cover briefly which skills we should look forward and pick up during our meetings in the future. So it is just where we are. I think for the meetings, I will try it myself, but we can collectively think about it. Just bring 1 or 2 USB extension cords, USB to USB, and put keyboard here, so that presenter can stay here without jumping. I have already post-processed most of the files from your presentations, and what is visible, like coming from here to there. And here are our alternatives where we should think together and take decision. So if you meet today, Tuesday, then one lab on November 2nd, and then present on November 3rd, it will be, we will relax in the rest of semester, but we will put a lot of stress for this day. So the plan B is that we use, at least since we are skipping coming Wednesday, we use at least the 2nd and 9th for preparation, and we make these presentations later on November 10th. It should be practical. In the reasonable time, please keep thinking, so that when I will be distributing sign-up list, maybe today is not a good chance because some of us are not here, and it should be everyone who should get a chance. So there are no more. Do not fear. There is no compilation things. So instead of open choice, I expanded couple of the subjects that were here before. So yesterday we went through input files and output data, and we started a little bit of density of states. And as we go, the next natural thing is to look on the orbitals and on the way to compute spectra, absorption spectra, based on the output of this software. And then there are some additional things, like taking different electronic configurations, like triplets, doublets, excited states, and main chapter that probably we will do last night before the presentations. So those who will select those subjects should be really brave. Is molecular dynamics and conversion of molecular dynamics into movies. So it is most spectacular part of presentation, but it is most advanced, and we will do it, probably go over it in the lab just last night before presentations. So when there will be sign-up list, judge yourself, like, if I am ready for such a stress. So we already went through definitions, we went through gas of electrons, and we are on two theorems. And then we'll go through practical implementations and the ways how to convert whatever this software is doing into observables. So in the next 15 minutes, I will not tell a single word about theorems, because it is boring and the second theorem is simple. We better just focus a little bit on practical skills, so that having them on the verbal presentations doesn't help from the first time, but it kind of helps you slowly turn in the right direction and start slowly thinking of it. So upon running, you have seen that there are a lot of output files, and among them there are two most important output files. One is outcar, which is an analog of Gaussian.log file that contains total energy, orbitals, and everything the code has computed, and the wavecar, which is analog of .chk file in Gaussian. It's a file that contains orbitals as a primary stuff. And if you look, this will be substantially larger file. The larger the model, the bigger the file. So, who was presenting density of states? Whitney and Aaron. Yes, we all have a general idea by now, and you have successfully completed some homeworks, so that if you do have a lot of states, it is too big number to plot them individually, and one needs a consolidated way, so one can wrap up each orbital energy with a continuous profile and add them together, right? With either Gaussian or Lorentzian profile, and it is what the codes that you were presenting and those who will select density of states will present will come over the subject. How to convert set of discrete energies into continuous function. I saw this here. Yes, you're here. Basis sets, which you are expert in. In your presentation and in Gaussian software, the orbitals are represented as expansion coefficients in front of atomic orbitals, or the specific functions that replace atomic orbitals, right? In VASP software, there are no atomic orbitals. Instead of them, there are plane waves. Look, do you see it from there? Yeah. Okay, so exponential minus I k r. So it is completely different function, and see, it is not localized near any specific ion. It is infinite, or as big as the simulation cell. And therefore the expansion coefficients, they're indexed by this momentum, k. So there are very big number of basis functions, much bigger than in Gaussian. Like even for smaller simulation, it's like 10,000, 100,000 basis functions. But they're very simple and they are easy mathematically processed. And instead of saving space distributions, one saves these expansion coefficients. You see connection? A little bit. Different functions, but still concept of expansion coefficients. So you recognize this pattern. View. So it's if you scroll through outcar file, we do see list of orbitals, their energies, and their occupations. Right? And these occupations on the chemical language, it means like orbital has or doesn't have electrons. And if we are looking more on the physics side, we are looking on the occupation number that changes continuously from 1 to 0. So if we would, by now, any models that we dealt with did have a substantial band gap. In all of your homework, the gap was like 10 electron volts, 5 electron volts, maybe 3 electron volts. Did any of you had the 0.1 electron volt as a gap? No, because we were dealing with transparent white molecules, not dye molecules, or semiconductors, or dielectrics. But as soon as we touch metals, one would have the very small gap. And then the occupation can get from discrete numbers, like 2 and 0, can get to 0.1, 0.5. So continuous change of occupation between these orbitals. And by running this little script, you convert set of orbitals into pictures like this, where the occupied bands are highlighted by filling the shapes. So it is what you have by now and what you can happily, I hope, happily do as a homework for all models that you do have. When we will meet next Wednesday, we will do orbitals and we will go into the implementation of this equation that you may have seen in your previous life, where the ability of a molecule to absorb light appears as is connected with transition dipole. So, original state, final state, position operator between them. So we will be using VASP calculations to explore transition dipoles and build optical spectra. Boring. Yes. What else can we do before we go to theorems? We are still missing two persons, so we may postpone to Tuesday meeting selection of the presentations. Yes, it will be wiser. So, theorem, relatively quick. First theorem was that if we know the density, then we know everything. Second theorem, if we know the correct density, then the energy computed based on this density will be minimal, absolute minimum of total energy for this system. Make sense? So it is basically re-verbalization of the variational theorem on the language of the density functional. I was just practicing laziness of printing this for you guys. And you don't mind, so we do not have another chapter of homework, but I was thinking about it. So you can set up a flowchart with input, output, and some additional logical cornerstones, and then from the proof we can get the final statement of the theorem. So we are going to set up the knowledge of the density. At the beginning, we should set up that it is good density in mathematical sense, like it is always positive. It is real, like no imaginary densities. And we are going to throw in a couple of logical steps, logical background cornerstones. We will throw in the variational theorem, and we are going to throw in the first theorem. And then we do a couple of simple logical steps, and there will be no corrupt logic. There will be no ad absurdum steps here. It will be just very straightforward that we will obtain that correct density minimizes the absolute energy. So here are the steps that we are going to go through. So we are going to look through the components of the total energy, again as we do almost any meeting, like kinetic, nuclear to electrons, electron to electron. Then look for conditions, define that our density that enters the theorem is a good density, and then we will go through two branches. One branch for when everything is ideal, ideal density, ideal energy, ideal wave functions, and second is trial branch, when we deform our density a little bit and see what happens. And then we will just compare them and see that one is bigger than another and come to the final declaration. Make sense? No objections? So we want to show that zero ideal density gives minimum energy, and we will prove it. We are going to compare ideal density and trial density, which means we, at each point of space, we deform our ideal density a little bit. So it's like it was one function, and we slightly deform it. As soon as we deform it, we will see that it will lead to increment of total energy. Good? And our cornerstones are variational theorem, which tells the same for wave functions, and our first theorem that from the density we can get everything. So there is an analogy. It can be written in a similar way. One can write in a similar way the theorem that we are going to prove right now and the standard variational theorem. So if we do have ideal wave function, and then we generate a trial wave function that is a little bit different, then the total energy, expectation value of total energy computed for trial function will be bigger than total energy for ideal ground state wave function. Good? So, in the sense of the logic of our previous meeting, the density does define external potential and the total energy. And we can tell that we can introduce the procedure that converts density into total energy, which is called functional, right? And denoted with square brackets. And the designers of this theorem decided that since this procedure, how the density is converted into energy, includes the external potential, one may add the subscript V for external potential into the functional. So here is a function, which means the protocol of converting density into energy. But this protocol, the way how the density is converted into energy, includes the specifics of the external potential. Please give me signs if it is too slow or too quick. No objections. No signs. Okay. So we are still here. So the progress will be highlighted by different colors. So our protocol of converting density into energy contains three terms, as always for electronic degrees of freedom. The interaction kinetic energy of electrons, energy of interacting between electrons and ions, and interaction of electrons to each other. And in the spirit of this density functional theory, we can tell that each of those now are functionals. Each of those, see this little rectangular square bracket. The kinetic energy and electron to electron interaction it is once and forever. It is the same for each molecule. So the specifics of the molecule is hidden only in the electron to nuclear interaction, into the external potential. And in this proof, in the theorem, we can use the fact that the external potential that we will be dealing with later is the one that comes out from the ideal density. Here's a little bit more on the notation that we went over last time, but here we can go over it once again. So if we know the external potential, either by setting up explicitly interaction with ions, or we have by some way derived it from the density, we can set up an algorithm how to get energy out of density. If you do know potential and we do know density, we just integrate them together and get the average expectation value of the energy. So this is the procedure that replaces this Bryant-Cat Dirac notation, if we dealing only with density. Good. External potential density gives energy of interacting with ions. Before we did have this Dirac notation, now we do have this integral. And it is just very, very comfortable for, maybe not for writing equations, but for setting up computations. So then we are starting our flowchart, at least in our imagination. So we declare that the start with any density we consider are good densities. So since we are keeping in mind a specific molecule, we need to constrain it with the specific number of electrons. So we, in several densities, they will correspond to the same system with the same number of electrons. And we are not considering less than 0 electrons. or less than 0 electrons at any point, which is natural for scientists but could be okay for mathematicians. So two branches. One branch is the density that would correspond to ideal situation in the world. Ideal density that corresponds to this molecule in its ground state, computed with best possible higher level method, or just measured directly. And trial density that differs from the ideal one. So what is our goal? What are we talking about?
Go to the minimum energy by using density.
Yes, yes. We want to prove that if we start with right density, we will get the minimum. Or if the density is wrong, then we get something bigger. And the plan is to take into account the variational theorem. We just want to translate the language of variational theorem of wave function into language of density. But if you want to make this translation, we need to bring up these same components, like Hamiltonian and wave function, right? So the Hamiltonian and wave function are coming because of the first theorem. If we know the density, then we know Hamiltonian and wave function. And then we can use them for the variational theorem. So if we start with ideal density, then we will get ideal wave function. If we start from trial density, then we will get the corrupt wave function, which is deformed. Now, we can formulate total energy originated from our trial branch as expectation value of our Hamiltonian with trial wave function. Good? And our Hamiltonian is kinetic, electron, and external. If we write the same for the ideal wave function, we have the same Hamiltonian, but the wave function will be different. It will be the deformed, not deformed, it will be ideal wave function corresponding to ideal density. And then, so we have already used conditions on wave function, or on the density. We have used the first theorem by getting wave function, at least in our imagination. And now we are going to use variational theorem. So if variational theorem is correct, then upper line will be bigger than the lower line. Yes? No? So the any change from ideal wave function will give bigger total energy. So if the upper line is bigger than the lower line on the right, then on the left. Upper line will be bigger than the lower line on the right. So the total energy generated from trial function will be bigger than total trial density, will be bigger than total energy generated from ideal ground state density, which can be interpreted that as soon as we make any deviation from ideal density, the energy will increase. I'm kind of repeating the same word about 20 times. How can we look at it once again with a different angle? Any change of density will increase energy. Which means that if it is a bad way, you do not want to increase energy. But if you will browse among this multidimensional space in approaching the total density, then it will decrease energy. It will minimize energy. So if we will design an algorithm that will approach us as close as possible to ideal density, on one hand, and we do have a correct protocol of converting density into energy, then we will minimize total energy. We will approach minimum of the energy. Good? Does it sound similar to self-consistent procedure of Hartree-Fock? So by now those are only ideas. But in a short time, I would like to not doing it today, because it will be just one logical block that is better to present once and completely. We can convert these ideas of self-consistency, of minimizing total energy, approach to ideal density by several increments, is implemented in so-called Kohn-Sham procedure. That will be subject of our next meeting. We will finish earlier today, which means I'm giving you a piece of time. But next time we meet, I will borrow it back from you. Let me see if there are some more statements. Okay, summary. First theorem: from density when we get external potential, we function Hamiltonian. Good. Second potential: the ideal density minimizes total energy compared to any other density. End of meeting number 19. Everyone is adjourn is announced. Everyone is free to leave. We are going off records, and I will stay here a little longer if anyone has questions.